Hello everyone. In today's video, I will be going over the front side of the 1-3 Piecewise Functions notes. Reminder, your homework assignment is homework number 1-3. Our first problem here, we're looking at a real life scenario that involves a piecewise function. This is actually a lot more common in the real world than you think, especially when you consider that in the past we look at a lot of linear functions where you just have a perfectly straight line. That's not common in real world actually. So here let's look at park admission prices. So like an amusement park, for instance. Hopefully you've been to one before, Kings Island, Holiday World, Cedar Point, something like that. You notice, if you have looked at this before, that typically they range the prices by your age. So typically younger kids can get in for a lot cheaper than older kids, for instance. So let's look at these age ranges and how that affects how much you're going to pay. So we're going to start at the 0 to 5. You may or may not be able to see this, but there is a range here. It's a darkened line. And from 0 to, there's an open circle on 5. That means that 5 is actually not included in this. So if a 5-year-old walks into the park, they're not going to pay this price. They're going to pay the next one where the solid dot is. So for our age range here, we're going to say under 5. Under 5 years. If you are a baby up to 4 years old, you are going to pay no money at all. You are going to get in for free. Since we're sitting on the x-axis here, y is 0. If you are 5 and not quite 15, so 5 to 14 years old, you're going to fall into this category. This is 25 on the y-axis, so you are going to pay $25 if you're aged 5 to 14. And then 15-year-olds, unfortunately, they have to start paying the highest price possible, and this is for everyone else. So if you are 15 and older, 15 and up, you are going to pay $80 to get into this park, which seems ridiculous. It is ridiculous, but actually, that's not far off from reality. Actually, some park prices, depending on when you go, they could be even more than $80. It just depends. So that's just an idea of what piecewise function is. Typically, it jumps. It's not one continuous line like you're used to. It's pretty broken up. Let's get away from the graphs for the rest of this video and focus just on the algebra part of these functions. So this is what it looks like on paper if you don't graph it. Evaluate each piecewise function for x equals -8 and x equals 7. So they want us to, if I plug in x, what is the f of x? What is y going to be for each of these functions? So number 2, here we have f of x. This is just notation for y. I'm not going to write down y though because I am going to keep using this. If I'm graphing though, I like to use y instead of f of x. So f of x equals 2x if x is less than 0, or f of x equals 5 if x is greater than or equal to 0. So how this works, you want to take your x value and you want to figure out which function you're going to plug it into. So let's start with x equals -8. Start with the top one and work your way down. So you ask yourself, is -8 less than 0? I hope you're saying yes. -8 is less than 0. So we're going to use the function that goes with it. Use f of x equals 2x. When I plug this in, I'm going to put the -8 in for this x. That's just notation for x equals -8. I'm putting it in its spot. And then on the right side, I am going to put that -8 in for x as well. When I'm evaluating, I'm not going to do anything to this side of the equation. This is just a notation, a symbol. There's no math to do here, so you just leave it. On the right side, I'm going to get a number. 2 times -8 is -16. and that's it. So coming back to the directions for a moment, when it says evaluate, that's just really fancy word for plug in and get an answer, which is exactly what I did here. That's all you have to do. Let's do this again for x equals 7. Start with the top one and ask yourself, is 7 less than 0? No. So it has to fit in this one, but again, ask yourself, is 7 greater than or equal to 0? Yes. That works. So this time we're going to use the bottom function. This time we use f of x equals 5. And by the way, your x value will always fit into one of the given functions. It has to. There aren't any numbers left out here. So we're going to plug that in. We have f of x is 7 equals, there's no x on the right side, so it just equals 5, and I'm done. So these are my two answers. Just a tip, when you're done with the problem, especially on your tests and quizzes, please put a box or circle of some kind around it so I can very easily find your answer in your work. Number 3, g of x equals 2 minus x if x is less than or equal to 5. G of x equals negative x squared if, I'm going to read this exactly as it goes, and then I'm going to show you another way to read it. If 5 is less than x and x is less than 8. Another way to say this that makes a lot more sense. X is between 5 and 8. X is just between those two numbers. And then for our last one, g of x equals 6 if 8 is less than or equal to x. This is written backwards from what we're used to. So essentially, 8 has to be smaller than or equal to x. So x is going to be a number that is 8 or larger than 8. Let's start with negative 8. X equals negative 8 from the directions. We're going to start with the top one and work our way down. Is negative 8 less than or equal to 5? Yes. Negative 8 is less than or equal to 5. That's the one it works for, so we're going to use the first function. So we have g of x equals 2 minus x. By the way, g of x is just another function notation. F and g are the most common letters that we'll use for this. Plugging in negative 8 for x. We have 2 minus, use parentheses here, negative 8. G of negative 8 equals, hopefully you already see what's happening here. 2 minuses in a row give us a positive, so we have 2 plus 8, which is 10. G of negative 8 is 10. Now let's do that again for 7. X equals 7. Start with the first one and work your way down. Is 7 less than or equal to 5? No, 7 is bigger than 5. Is 7 between 5 and 8? Yes. 5 is less than 7 and 7 is less than 8. It's between the two. This is the one that it works for. So we're going to use this second one. G of x equals negative x squared. This one you have to be extra careful on. I'm going to show you a very common mistake that can be made here. G of 7 equals, I'm going to show you the right way first, then I'll show you the mistake. This 7 goes just in for x. So I'm going to write the negative first, use a parenthesis here, 7, close the parenthesis, then the square. G of 7 equals negative. 7 squared, remember your order of operations, PEMDAS, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. We have to worry about the exponent first before we do anything with the negative. So it's just going to hang out here for another step. 7 squared is positive 49. So my final answer is actually negative 49 because of that negative outside of the parentheses. And that's my answer. Here's the common mistake that I could see someone making very easily. And it comes to just not being careful. If they plugged it in like this. So this is wrong. If you plugged it in this way. G of 7 equals negative 7 squared. And you put the negative inside of the parentheses. Hopefully you remember a negative times a negative is still positive. So negative 7 squared comes out to be positive 49, which is different from what I actually got. So that's why it's a big deal that you put your numbers in the right place and don't bring in any additional signs. So negative 49 is the correct answer. Another thing, this should make sense why this should just look wrong in the first place when you first plugged it in. Because where you plug in x with the parentheses should be the same number. In this parentheses, I have 7, and over here I have negative 7. So that should already just feel off. Last problem. This h of x should be an f, so just mark that out and make it an f. F of x equals x if x is less than negative 1, or f of x equals 2x plus 1 if x is greater than or equal to negative 1. So this one's written a little differently. We're not going to use negative 8 and 7 as it was in the directions. We're going to figure out what these four are. Reminder, this notation, what this is telling you, I want you to remember that inside of the parentheses is usually an x. So when there's a number where x is supposed to be, that tells you that x equals that number. So remember, this is supposed to be f of x. So where there's a number, that means x equals negative 6. Here, x equals negative 1. X equals 0. X equals 4. That's all that notation is telling you. Now we can use our piecewise function here to find out what f of x is. So we're going to plug our negative 6 in here, figure out which one it works for. Start with the first one. Is negative 6 less than negative 1? Yes. So we're going to use the top one, f of x equals x. So we're going to plug in our x. F of negative 6 equals negative 6. There's nothing else to do here. This is my answer. Negative 1. Start with the first one. Is negative 1 less than negative 1? No, it's equal to it. So this is not going to work. So let's check the other one. Is negative 1 greater than or equal to negative 1? Yes, it's or equal to, so that works still. So we have, I forgot to write this on the other one. It's not 0. Negative 1 is greater than or equal to negative 1. Yes. So we're going to use the bottom function. F of x equals 2x plus 1. F of plug in your x value, negative 1, equals 2 times negative 1 plus 1. So wherever there's an x, I'm going to put in negative 1. F of negative 1 equals 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Bring down the plus 1. And lastly, f of negative 1 equals negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1. That's it. 2 more. X equals 0. Is 0 less than negative 1? No. Is 0 greater than or equal to negative 1? Yes. 0 is greater than or equal to negative 1. That works. So we're going to use f of x equals 2x plus 1 again, because that's what goes with that inequality. Plug in 0. F of 0 equals 2 times 0 plus 1. F of 0 equals 2 times 0 is 0, plus 1. Finally, f of 0 equals 0 plus 1 is 1. Last one, x equals 4. Is 4 less than negative 1? No. Is 4 greater than or equal to negative 1? Yes. 4 is greater than or equal to negative 1. That works. So we're going to use f of x equals 2x plus 1. So we're going to plug in a positive 4 for the x. F of 4 equals 2 times 4 plus 1. F of 4 equals 2 times 4 is 8 plus 1. And finally, f of 4 equals 9 is my final answer. And that's it. That is how you evaluate a piecewise function for a given value of x. If you have any questions or anything at all to do with the notes or the homework that goes with it, please reach out to me via email or in person. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.